Welcome to another Aspire demonstration movie. In this first movie in a series of 3, we will introduce you to the Aspire compilation toolchain and discuss the overall tool flow. In the second and third video, we'll show you how to configure that toolchain, how to annotate your source code, and then eventually we'll show some live action on how to use this toolchain. If you've seen the very first video that introduces the project, you already know this picture. The toolchain starts with annotated source code, then applies some transformations on the source code to deploy source level protections. The code is then compiled with a standard compiler, and then in the last step it will be rewritten, that is, the binary code will be rewritten to produce an application that consists of 2 parts, the client-side app that will run on the mobile device, and some server-side logic that will run on a secure server, and that will help in guaranteeing the security requirements of the client-side app. To study the integration of a wide range of protection techniques, we developed this whole toolchain, so we have a prototype implementation of it. And for demonstration purposes and for validation purposes, we focused on a specific platform. In this case, you might remember from a previous presentation, it's an ARM v7 platform, and we target Android 4.4. And what we want to rewrite are native binaries as well as dynamically linked libraries. The source code from which we start is C code. We will only protect C code. However, the application can also consist of a bit of C++ code, for example, to wrap the functionality in a library. The C++ code will be compiled into the application, but it will not be protected. So how did we implement the different components? Well, let's start with this binary level protection toolchain. For this, we relied heavily on Diablo, a link-time rewriting framework developed at Ghent University. It is in this tool that most of the binary level analysis and transformations, meaning on an assembly level representation of the program, are implemented. But rather than starting from assembler, it starts from object files and a linked binary or library. Almost all of the functionality for link-time rewriting developed in this project to deploy binary level protections is available in open source at the following link. Now, to compile the source code into object code that is passed to Diablo, we rely on standard compilers. In this project, we support GCC 4.8.1, LLVM 3.4, and binutils 2.23. Those were the versions of those tools that were available at the start of the project. Now, unfortunately, the standard versions of these tools cannot be used as is. The problem is that the code they generate can be handled by Diablo, but Diablo lacks sufficient information to handle that code conservatively and to ensure that the rewriting of the binary code is done correctly. We have to make sure that these tools produce enough information for Diablo. More concretely, we have to ensure that symbol information is generated that, for example, identifies manually written assembly code or data blocks in the code section. And we also have to ensure that the relocation information in the object files is sufficiently precise, in other words, that it's not relaxed. For this, we developed a bunch of very small fixes, and those are all available online at the following address. It's important to stress that we do not limit the code generated by the compilers. We only ensure that they produce enough symbol and relocation information. This does not require anything special. In fact, most of the things that we patch in these open source tools were already supported in the past by proprietary toolchains such as the one from ARM. Then let's look at the source level processing. For these, we rely on 2 tools in the project. The first is TXL, which is a tool for rewriting source code, so you can specify a grammar of your programming language and you can specify analysis and transformations on top of it. And because we are handling C code, we also rely on a second tool, that's Grammatech Code Server. This is a proprietary tool, but by means of plugins, it gave us a very easy way to develop all kinds of source code analysis at the whole program level that we needed to deploy our source level protections. Now, a very important aspect is that while the binary rewriting is mostly done in one pass over the program, so it builds an intermediate representation, then transforms that representation, and then writes out the final binaries again, at the source level this is not the way we proceed. Instead, we invoke a bunch of scripts and we iteratively transform the source code, deploying one protection after the other. And after each transformation, that is, after each protection technique has been deployed, we generate source code again that will be read and parsed by the next step. For this source level processing and the deployment of source level protections, again, a number of steps are available online. Not all of them are available online, because some of them are considered proprietary by the companies in this project, but several important ones, such as the extraction of the annotations from the original source code, are available in open source. Now we described the components of our toolchain, but how are these linked together? Well, for that we relied on the Do-It automation tool. This is a Python tool for automating and managing tasks, and it basically stems from traditional build systems, but has been extended to become more flexible to enable all kinds of tasks, to define inputs and outputs and the actions that need to be taken. And so we rely on this tool, and we build a tool on top of it to steer our whole protection toolchain. This tool that we developed is completely open sourced, and it's also available at GitHub. Because this tool and all the individual components in our toolchain require quite some configuration, and because they depend on lots of external components, we also set up a Docker container which allows everyone to rebuild our development environment in a very easy way. This Docker container, you can also find it online at the GitHub repository of our project. Furthermore, we've reported on this toolchain in detail in a lot of deliverables in the project, and there is one specific deliverable, deliverable 5.11, which is a report that reports on the whole Aspire framework. So on this whole toolchain, it contains a description of the annotations, of the configuration, of all the individual processing steps. It gives an overview of the tool flow, and so on. So for detailed information and a kind of manual to all these open sourced elements, you can have a look at this report. So this was basically the overview of the toolchain. Let's zoom in on some specific aspects. For example, the source level part, if we zoom in on that, in our report, in this deliverable 5.11, we have an overview. We describe all phases, and here you see a graphical representation. You see that we have lots of processing steps for deploying different protections, but also, for example, here on the right, you see an annotation extraction step. That's to feed annotation information to the binary level processing. You also see that we do some pre-processing. That's because most of the tools operate on pre-processed code, but not all of them. For example, the white box crypto step here operates on code that has not yet been pre-processed. Now, in this report 5.11, we zoom in on all of these protection steps. For example, for the white box crypto, we also discuss all the detailed processing steps. And in descriptions like these, we use numbers for all processing steps and for all intermediate results. And actually, these numbers correspond to the directories in which intermediate files are being generated. So after you had a look at this documentation, it will be very easy to track the intermediate results and to interpret those results once an application is being built and protected. Here we see the code that implements these different steps in the white box crypto protection. So we have a main task. This is the do-it way of programming tasks. SLP03, source level processing 03. This is the same number as you saw in the previous picture. And you see we define here the inputs, the outputs, the tools that have to be invoked, the folders where everything has to be stored. And then we also have a bunch of subtasks, a caching phase, a phase to extract the annotations. We have furthermore an extraction step to further extract the annotations, an XML step. This generates XML from the annotation files that can then be handled by the white box generation tools. We have a pre-processing step as part of the white box crypto, and so on. We have all these tasks here, these subtasks that are defined in the toolchain. Also for the binary part, we describe the different processing steps. For example, you see here a step where we extract native code to replace it with bytecode. We see a step to translate the bytecode, and then afterwards you see more linking steps. This is where we link in different protection libraries, for example, remote attestation, a self-debugger, but also the translated bytecode and the VM that will interpret it. And then afterwards we do a final binary level protection step where we rewrite the code and implement lots and lots of other protections, and where we produce logs and map files and so on. I will not show it here, but again, for each of these processing steps, more detailed discussions are present in this deliverable 5.11. Now, this is where this video ends. If you want to know more, there's 2 more videos, like I already said. There's one that describes the annotations that you can use in your source code to indicate which protection should be applied, and which also discusses the way you should configure this whole configuration flow. And then there's a 3rd video where you can actually see the whole toolchain in live action. Bye.